So if you come to my office, the wall is festooned with a number of things. Generally my best trading results that I've achieved, which generally I don't publish. But also there's this. This is an article that I wrote for Shares magazine about when I went to Omaha, Nebraska to meet Warren Buffett. Please like and comment on the video below. That will allow me to produce better quality videos and more of them in the future. So how does some bloke from Northeast Hampshire end up meeting Warren Buffett? Well, the story behind it is one that I thought I should share, because there's a lot of little life stories in there. There's been so many things I've done in my life, half of which I haven't talked about yet, that seem remarkably impossible, and yet I have done them. And it's really a story about just having a generally positive attitude, you know, looking to open doors. If you open a door and there's nothing there, then you can just close it. Or sometimes those doors get slammed in your face, but it shouldn't stop you from attempting to open more doors. So how did I end up getting to meet and talk with Warren Buffett? To understand how that happened, there's a huge backstory which I'm going to cut short quickly. But basically, I found myself working for a US tech company in the early 90s. Prior to that, I've been really interested in trading. Obviously, you're familiar with my betting career. And I'd been interested in trading on financial markets and investing, and I'd sort of messed around with quite a few things and done many stuff in the late 80s and early 90s, but I hadn't really settled upon exactly what methodology, what style I was actually going to adopt. And I I used to live on the south coast, used to commute to London to work for this tech company. And one lesson from there is that I was sort of sponsored, basically, the opportunity to work for this company. Somebody took a lot of faith and gave me a shot at doing this job, and it was a big break for me. And I'm eternally grateful to the guy that gave me the opportunity. And I made damn sure that I repaid that as often as I have ever since. And, you know, it's important to understand that, you know, when somebody gives you the break, you have to respect that. Sometimes you don't realize that at the time and you only realize later, but I'm telling you now that if somebody gives you a break or tries to help you, repay them tenfold, because it will pay you back 50-fold in the future. So there's a lesson for you anyhow. But anyway, I'd landed this job. I was determined to do the best job that I possibly could, and that resulted in me making a trip out to the headquarters in Houston in Texas, some distance away from Omaha, Nebraska. But when I was there, obviously the flight out to Houston is a very long one. I was looking for stuff to read. We did not have Kindles in those days, or iPads. We did have very chunky laptops then, if you call them that. And what happened was, obviously you would go into a bookshop and you'd buy a book, which you'd have a read of on the flight back before falling asleep. And the book that I bought was The Making of an American Capitalist by Roger Lowenstein. And this is easily the best Buffett book that you can read. And I know The Snowball was the one that got all of the fuss and publicity and was about twice the size of this. But The Snowball was really a biographical account of Buffett and his relationship with other people, whereas this is about Buffett and his businesses. And I think it's by far the best book. And you know, it goes into great detail about how everything happened, and in much better detail than other items. Now, because it's slightly older now, I imagine it won't have the most recent stuff in there, but I still think that it is easily the best book that I have read. It is certainly the best, I've got the price on the back here, the best $28 or $27.50 that I ever spent, because when I read the book I was absolutely captivated, and I learnt that, you know, this suddenly everything went whoop, and you realised that this was the moment, this was the thing that you'd been desperately waiting for, and everything became clear right in front of me. And at that point, when I got back into the UK, I said to people, you know, do you know of this guy, do you know of this company? Of course nobody did. And I said, well, you know, I have found what I want to do and how I'm going to do it, and I'm going to meet this guy. And of course everybody laughed. They sort of said, you know, why would somebody here who's worth billions want to meet with some guy who's never met before? And everybody laughed it off. And my next lesson is always use the word impossible with the greatest of care. You'll be amazed at what you can achieve if you put your mind to it. Now and again you need a little bit of luck, but you know, as long as you have an objective, you work towards it, and you persevere, amazing things happen. So yeah, I said back then, you know, I invested. I knew if I wanted to go and meet him, I'd have to go to the AGM. That would be the best way of doing it. So what I did was I bought some Berkshire Hathaway stock. Now, of course, Berkshire Hathaway stock nowadays is worth about $250,000 per share. It was worth much less back then, but it was still very expensive. So I remember buying Berkshire Hathaway stock and saying, you know, I want to buy one share, which everybody laughed at as well. But, you know, when you look back then, it was obviously significantly cheaper than it is now, even though it was quite expensive back then. But I knew I needed to own the stock in order to attend the AGM to have a shot at meeting Warren Buffett. So that's what I did. I immediately invested in Berkshire Hathaway, which has turned out to be a fantastic investment, of course. But I did that with the intention of going to the AGM. But for years I was in a normal job, so I never really had the opportunity to do that. But when I left my old career and started doing this full-time, what I do now, that opened up that window for me. All of a sudden I could go off and travel and do other things. So I decided at the first sort of decent opportunity that I had that I would go to the AGM. When the documents, documents arrive through the post, I think in February time, you can send off, get the shareholder meeting credentials, which they send back to you, and then you just need to get to Omaha to be able to attend the AGM. So yeah, I flew, I caught the train from here to Gatwick, flew to Dallas, Fort Worth, and then caught a connecting flight off to Omaha, Nebraska, and turned up that weekend at the AGM. Now I didn't know much. I'd done a bit of research because I'd looked at what other people had done, and I'd figured out how the AGM worked and stuff like that. But the real motivator for me going was Buffett was hinting that at the previous AGM that he was going to meet and greet international shareholders. And as we got closer to the date, all of a sudden, you know, there was an itinerary and there was my opportunity. Not only was I going to go to Omaha, Nebraska, but I'd actually have the opportunity to meet Buffett as well. And the interesting thing about that opportunity is it only lasted a couple of years, because all of a sudden when people realized that you could actually go and meet him, then it became too much. There were too many people that were just turning up at the AGM with the opportunity to meet Buffett. And of course, his status was rising all of the time, so the meeting was getting busier and so on. So I caught it just at the point at which a couple of important things happened, or a few important things. There weren't too many people at the AGM. He was prepared to meet international shareholders and felt that he was obliged to. But also you could ask questions during the AGM as well. And those three things do not exist any longer. So yeah, when I decided that I was going to go, I thought, wouldn't it be great to actually go off and you know, sell the story? That would help pay for part of the trip and maybe get me a hotel upgrade or something. So I went to a load of magazines, but they weren't interested. And I'd sort of pretty much given up on that when I finally got a call returned from a magazine, and they said, yeah, we'd love to run the story, but obviously we want to see it when you return, because we don't know you from anybody, and therefore we want to see exactly how you've written it and what you did and so on. And I said, well, I'm going to meet Buffett, you know. That's probably going to be a good story for you to run. So turned up in Omaha, checked into the Holiday Inn in Omaha, and then very early on the Saturday morning, I actually, you know, you have to get up very early on the Saturday to be able to go down and get your place at the AGM. Caught a cab and went into Omaha or central Omaha to go to the AGM. We went to, I think it was the Quest Center, if I remember correctly, if I remember correctly. And stayed in line, did the AGM, asked some questions, and then after the main meeting finished, I had a special badge which said International on it, and that actually allowed me to go up and meet and chat to Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. The following year I did exactly the same thing, but that time I managed to get to meet Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger and Bill Gates at the same time, and I got them to sign an annual report just to prove that I'd been there. I didn't believe that anybody would think that I could have actually done that. So I actually got Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger on that first meeting to sign $1 million bill, just to prove that I'd actually been in their presence, because we weren't allowed to take photos, we weren't allowed to record it, but I did write it up. So Shares Magazine, this is the actual week that they published, and they did a double-page spread on my journey to Omaha, Nebraska, to meet Warren Buffett, and the sort of stuff that we talked about, the questions that I asked him, and other items like that. So the magazine did publish. Not only that, but they were so impressed that I ended up writing for them for 3 years, believe it or not. So there's another, I had no intention of writing for a living, especially in a financial magazine. But given the knowledge that I'd acquired, and I actually thought that that's probably the career that I was going to go down. I was going to be an investor, and that's what I was going to do. And it actually, Betfair diverted me off of that track. So I ended up writing for Shares Magazine for 3 years, a whole load of articles about investing and all the stuff that I'd learned. And didn't expect that, but that's the way that things work out sometimes. But more importantly, when I went to Omaha, you tend to find that other people had been on exactly the same journey. So the interesting thing about going there is you meet like-minded people, and of course that kicks you off in another direction as well. So that morning at the Holiday Inn, when I went to get a cab, they were in very short supply, and we decided to share with a couple of other guys, and those guys have become some of my best friends, and they went off and started their own hedge funds. And I was more than delighted recently to go to the London Business School and do a quick introduction for one of the guys that was doing a talk there, because we became really good friends, and I think that he has the potential to become something much bigger. I've been investing for many years, and it's a path that led me to Omaha, Nebraska, almost 13 years ago to the day where I met Warren Buffett. But all of that was because we just happened to meet outside the Holiday Inn, going for the same cab in Omaha, Nebraska. And that's led me off on another journey in terms of understanding the hedge fund scene and investment management and all of those things much, much deeper. So I've spent a lot more time in the US in the last sort of 10, 15 years or so than I could have ever imagined. Because I've been introduced, one person introduces you to another, who introduces you to another, and so on and so forth. But the great thing about those sort of journeys is, I was quite early on in my Betfair career back in 2004 when I met Buffett. And so all those people that were around me then have seen the growth and what happens to everything ever since. So that just means that you are a more interesting person than they first imagined, and then you end up going off at many different tangents. After I wrote it up in 2004, I obviously went back the following year to do the same thing. But when I landed in the US, I was visiting some old friends in Houston when I got a phone call, and it was from Bloomberg, who said that they wanted to interview me.
Welcome to Bloomberg Tomorrow Tonight. A look at the stories that will be making headlines tomorrow. I'm Charlie Pellet. Tomorrow, Buffett will be in Omaha for the highly anticipated Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting. Still, says shareholder Peter Webb, it will be an enjoyable gathering.
I suppose it's a big get-together of almost of a brotherhood, really, I suppose. With 20-odd thousand people, it's difficult to describe it as a family any longer, I think. But, yeah, it's a great meeting to meet like-minded people and to get an appreciation of what Buffett and Berkshire stands for, and to sort of go along with those goals.
Typically, how accessible is Buffett at these events? When you say you'd like to put a question to him, does he make himself available for those kinds of one-on-one sessions with shareholders?
Well, one thing that brings international shareholders back year after year is last year he decided to actually meet every single international shareholder, and he's going to do the same again this year. So for the last few months, I've been thinking about what killer question I can put to Buffett that he can answer in front of me.
Have you come up with that answer yet?
No, I'm still thinking. I have a short list of 3 or 4, and I guess on the plane up to Omaha, it will be the time when I decide exactly what that question is going to be.
Are you happy with the shares' performance this year?
It's obviously could be a lot better, but certainly in terms of most value investors, price is not as important as the value that's within the share itself. So certainly I think that there's enough value within there, but I think the price is lagging. It's its intrinsic value at the moment.
Peter Webb heading off to his fourth Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting. Berkshire shares today up $749, 84,350, volume 760 shares.
And then I got a phone call from CBS and various other people, and the whole thing just went crazy. So the 2005 AGM was a bit different for me because I ended up doing a number of interviews for radio and TV and magazines and stuff based upon my 2004 journey, which was quite hilarious. So it just goes to show you that, you know, there are a number of important lessons through there. You know, never believe that anything is impossible. Never rule out anything that could possibly happen to you, and don't try and limit your paths. Just have an open mind and take everything in front of you as it happens, and you just never quite will know where it's going to lead. So just through meeting all of those people at the AGM and everything that's happened ever since has led me off on loads of fantastic journeys, and to meet people who I could have never imagined before. And it's generally, you know, shows you what can happen if you set your minds to it. And all of that was kicked off really just by picking up that book when I was in the US back in 1994. So yeah, you know, a decent book can change your life. And to reiterate what it was The Making of an American Capitalist by Roger Lowenstein. Very good book. But anyhow, yeah, managed to get to the AGM, met Buffett 2 years in a row, had a discussion, talked about a couple of key and important things. He remembered me from the year prior to that, and I also got to meet Charlie Munger and Bill Gates as well, which was a bit special. So yeah, my intention is to go back to the AGM in the very near future. I want to do it before that period passes into history. So I think 1 year I'm going to have to give up the guineas in order to do that, but it will be an absolute pleasure to return to Omaha, Nebraska.